Live? Yes, we are. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Schwartz. Welcome back to my channel. Today, very different perspective, as you can clearly see. We're doing a little something. Sorry about that. Glitched out for a second. Hello again. Yeah, we're doing something a little bit different this time. We're not going to be doing a whole lot of drawing in this particular stream, but I did want to talk to you guys about something that I know a lot of my students have wondered about, and so I've talked to them about it in the past, and got some music on right over there and switched things around so it'll be a little bit more comfortable for you. But yeah, the thing I wanted to talk to you guys about today is sketchbooks. And doing it this way, streaming it instead of trying to record it and condense things down, just makes it so that I can get these things out quicker and easier for you. So, sketchbooks. All artists love them. One of the most popular things about sketchbooks when it comes to artists is that you always want more. You gotta have just one more. You can't have just one sketchbook. Oh no. You gotta have more than one sketchbook. You gotta have another one. You gotta have another one. You gotta have a few more. And then you gotta have a few more. There was a sale. So the first thing that I want to say is, obviously from what you just saw, you don't need as many sketchbooks as I have here. Art is my life. I teach art, I do art in my downtime, I sell my art, I post my art, I'm always doing more art, so it makes more sense for me to spend my money on my art. So you don't need all the sketchbooks in the world. Just one, maybe two will suffice. But then you come to the conundrum of trying to choose a sketchbook, which is, what do I look for? Because it's very common for there to be the idea, excuse me for a second, it's a very common idea that a sketchbook is just a sketchbook. I mean, it's just paper inside of a binding and you draw on it. What's the difference? Well, there's actually quite a bit of difference, and almost every single book that I have here that I'm going to be talking to you guys about today has something different about it that makes it better suited for specific things. So how do you know what a sketchbook should be used for? Well, for that, you can actually look at the sketchbook itself. The one I'll use for an example in this case is the Strathmore sketch. This is the very long version, but the details of it are still going to hold true for the larger scale ones if they're in the sketch variety. And the Kanzen XL sketch book. So the thing that you want to look for when you're looking at sketchbooks is, what is the paper like, and how does it feel, and what pound is it? In this case, if you look at the Kanzen XL sketch right there, you should be able to see that it is what's called 50 pound. And pound simply refers to the thickness of the paper. So something that is 50 pound, you would think, oh, pound, that means it's pretty thick. But in actuality, it's very, very thin. Very thin, almost thinner than printer paper at this point. Hence why, right here, you'll see that there's 100 sheets of it, because the paper itself is significantly thinner. So, another example too would be coming over to the Kanzen sketch. I apologize if you can hear the AC in the background. Nothing to be done about it. It has to run. The house needs to stay cool. But if you look at the Strathmore sketch, we can take a look and see that the pound on this one, right there, is 60 pound. So this is about 10 weight heavier than the Kanzen sketch, which makes sense because there is only 50 sheets in this one versus 100 sheets here. Basically, the more pounds that paper is, the less sheets you're going to get in a sketchbook. Another good example would be if we pop over to another Kansen sketchbook. In this case, the Universal sketchbook here. This sketchbook is 65 pound. I actually thought that I'd written down more on that one, but I did not. And if we pop over, this is another sketchbook of the sketch variety. This is a Strathmore hardcover sketch, but it's still in the sketch brand. So the paper itself is 60 pound. And as you can tell, when we take a look here, very, very thin paper. It's very floppy, very loose. So what does the sketch mean? Because there are other sketchbooks that don't say sketch on them. For that one, we would have something like the Kansen Strathmore drawing sketchbook here. This paper is 80 pounds. So the paper itself has individual sheets that are significantly thicker than the other paper that we have seen. It's just something that you can more so feel, but this paper is a lot sturdier. So what does that mean for you when it comes to, well, how does this apply to the drawings itself? Well, the thing to think about with a sketch paper, hello Lyric, good to have you here. The thing with a sketchbook that has sketch in the title, again, you want to look here, anything that says sketch will mean that the paper is going to be more plentiful, but the paper itself will be thinner sheets than another kind of sketchbook. And so how that impacts your drawing is that this paper will not be able to take a whole lot of punishment. If you erase too hard, then you could end up accidentally creasing the paper. If you press too hard, you could accidentally tear through the paper. And we'll go through the specifics of how this whole thing actually works in terms of like how the paper reacts to certain things later on. But basically you have to remember that anything that has the sketch in the title of the sketchbook is not meant to be used for finished artwork. And by that it means this is not meant to be used for professional artwork or anything that you intend to like really dig into and work with more and more and more and refine a whole lot. You can't do a whole lot of erasing on sketch paper without the paper accidentally creasing because it's so thin that it can't handle the excessive erasing you might want to do, or it won't be able to handle repeated layers of tone or repeated uses of ink on it, especially not with paper like this. But the paper itself we'll talk about in just a moment. Need to get a quick break. Bump the camera. So again, this one right here is actually a Strathmore sketch, but this is one of the more high-end sketchbooks, mainly just in terms of the binding that it's in, because most sketchbooks or most sketch paper will not have a nice hard pleather binding on them. And so this just means that the drawings are better protected, and the paper itself is slightly heavier. Actually, no, I believe, yeah, these two sketchbooks have the exact same paper on them. The difference here is the size of this one and the quality of the binding on it. Because this, by contrast, costs about like $2 or $3, but the actual, this is the one that I did the anime eyes in, but the actual paper on front, very, very thin, very, very easily able to be torn. So when you're going for sketchbooks, you got to remember a sketch variety of sketchbook is meant specifically for just practicing. This is specifically just meant to train yourself. Don't go too in depth with any pieces that you do on a sketchbook that it just has this low of quality of paper. It only has 60 pounds. The lower the poundage, the lower the quality of the paper, the less punishment it can take. So with that in mind, the other sketchbook that I wanted to showcase is this one. This is it usually has a massive sticker right here. I wish I kept that sticker on there, but I did not. This is a Kanzen 1 brand of sketchbook, which I believe is about 70 pound of paper. And this is one that actually has extremely nice paper. Actually, hang on a second. I have another one of these over here. Yeah, it's right here. This is actually my first Kanzen 1 that has a picture of Aurelian Soul on it. This was actually, I drew this one on here. But the paper quality in here is actually quite good. This is somewhere, I would say this is somewhere in between the sketch paper and the next level up of paper. It actually takes ink rather well. The feel of the paper is very, very smooth, which usually means that you're not going to be able to do a whole lot of shading with a pencil on it, but it does mean that it will take ink rather well. And again, that's something that we're going to discuss here in just a little bit, but we're just doing a general overview of what the different types of sketchbooks that you can find, or the ones that I have. But it takes ink very well. The paper is nice and smooth, so again, that's why it will take ink well. The binding is very nice and solid, and the cover, if you can tell with the shading on Aurelian Soul, it actually has a little bit of a woven feeling to it, as opposed to the upper levels of Strathmore, which instead have more of a cobblestone-like texture to them, which is rather interesting. So in terms of the Kanzen 1, this one I would say is better suited for doing finished artwork in, if you're going to be doing ink work in here. Otherwise, if you want to do pencil shading, it will do pencil shading, but you would be better off just doing pen and ink, in here. This is actually a study of Zelda that I did a little while ago. You can see it takes pencil shading fine, but you're not going to be able to do a whole lot of nice blending with it because the paper can't hold it. So the Kanzen 1, pretty nice little sketchbook. I use it a lot, but my one complaint about it, and my one complaint about other sketchbooks as well, such as the higher end Strathmore ones, is that the pages are not perforated. And by that I mean, if you look right here on the sides, you'll see that these pages are stuck into this sketchbook. They're not going to come out unless I tear off this outside binding, which is fine, but that does mean it's an additional step for me to have to then take and cut those off. What I usually much prefer is when a sketchbook has perforated edges. And a good example of one that does have perforated edges would be the Kanzen Universal sketchbook. This is actually the same one that I drew and inked this cute little furry girl in a couple of weeks ago. But you'll see right there, the pages are indeed perforated. So if I wanted to, I can easily tear this page out and give it to somebody if I'm working on a commission, or just save it if I'm going to end up ditching the entire sketchbook if I hate how the whole thing turned out. I just like the convenience of having those perforated edges. Of course, I wouldn't use this one to give to someone for a commission because this is a sketch paper, which means it's only about 60 poundage, so it's not very high quality in terms of what someone would want for commission work. Now, if you want to talk about the higher level sketchbook, then you would want to get into the sketchbooks that have the word drawing in their title. In this case, again, I ripped off the label already just because I got impatient, and I like to do that with the new stuff that I get. But this is a Strathmore drawing sketchbook. Instead of sketch in the title, it has drawing. The paper in this one is 80 pounds, and it costs a little bit extra because there's 100 sheets in here. So this paper it feels very nice. This is drawing paper, which means that it is much more suited for doing finished artwork in. So this is something that you could continue to work on over and over and over again and not worry about the paper buckling or succumbing to pressure. Mainly just because this is higher poundage, which means it's thicker and it can take a little bit more punishment. So again, if you're wanting to practice, get a sketchbook with paper that is low poundage. If you're wanting a sketchbook that you can do finished works in and repeatedly go back and work on the same one, then you would want one that has a higher poundage. Usually about 70 to 80 pounds is what you would want to stay within if you want a reasonable price and you want to be able to keep working on the drawing for an extended length of time. The other one that I wanted to mention is this is a sketchbook that contains paper that is meant for finished artwork, 100% meant for it. And this actually has a unique feature to it that I haven't seen any other company utilize. And that is the Koh-i-Noor brand of sketchbooks. They have more than just the colored pencil variety here. They have a couple of different surfaces, but all of them utilize the same sort of gimmick that I'm going to be showing you. The first thing is that the Koh-i-Noor brand is 114 pounds. So this is very, very nice, sturdy paper. This can definitely take some punishment without much difficulty. This claims that it is just for colored pencil. I have found that to not be the case. Basically, quick tip. If a paper touts itself as being specifically for colored pencil, don't buy it. At least not for use with colored pencil. Strathmore made a colored pencil paper. It was awful. I've attempted colored pencil with this, and actually you can see here that what I do with any paper that I intend to use for finished artwork is I make a guide for myself. This is a strip of the paper, and then I do quick test strips of all the different types of materials that I might want to use with this paper to see how it reacts to them. You can see that it doesn't really do all that well with colored pencil, at least not any different than any other paper that I've seen. It does pretty well with ink, does pretty well with marker, doesn't really do that well with graphite, and it doesn't really do that well with colored pencil either. So I'm not really sure what to do with this paper, but you can also see there's only 30 sheets in here. This is a more expensive sketchbook. You don't get as many papers in it because it's thicker and because it's meant to be a little bit more high quality. But what this one also does is, you can see it right here, it touts this dome lock technology. Basically what that is you can take any of the pages here and you can take them out just like you would any normal sketchbook. But if you look there, these pages are designed to come in and out of the sketchbook so that at any time you can take a page, you can take it out, flip to any other random page, and then be able to just gently press the page back in. So I can definitely see how this would be useful for someone who does like journaling, or for someone who is, like writing a story or something like that, and so they can reorganize the chapters as they want to. But for someone like me, I don't really see this kind of technology really being useful to me personally. It's a cool gimmick, but again, it is just a gimmick. Excuse me. The other paper that I did want to talk about real quick, before I turn this camera around and we're going to be actually discussing and showing how each of these papers are a little bit different, excuse me, is the Strathmore toned line. This again, for me, despite the fact that there's 50 sheets, it's very cheap, and the paper itself is quite thin, This has proven to be the absolute best paper that I've ever had for use with color pencil. And it touts itself as being able to be used with graphite and with charcoal, but if you just take a look right here, you'll see that it actually works very, very well with color pencil. At least in the way that I do color pencil, anyway. Here's another example. But yeah, despite the fact that this is very thin paper and the surface of the paper is extremely smooth, this catches the color pencil at the absolute best of any paper that I've ever used, pretty much ever. They also have a toned gray line, and this does color pencil just as well, if not even better, than the toned tan. So which one I end up using for my pieces depends on kind of what I'm feeling at the moment. But I have a small variety of the toned tan because this is nicer to do quick little drawings on so I don't overstress myself. So whenever you get a sketchbook, you should always try it out. Try the first couple of pages out with all the different types of techniques and media that you might want to use to see how the paper reacts to it. But I can give you a quick little idea of how to actually do that, and as well as an explanation of what type of surface of paper you probably want. It's going pretty well, Feline. I have been talking about sketchbooks this whole time, been going through the ins and outs of like what the actual labeling on the paper means. So for example, this toned tan sketchbook, this is meant for finished artwork. If it was not meant for finished artwork, then it would say sketch in the title there, because sketch paper, significantly thinner paper, meant to be used for experimentation and for practicing. You're not supposed to spend a whole lot of time on one specific drawing of these. But the last ones that I'll show you before I turn this camera around and we talk about the actual paper itself, this is both really good and really bad for me, because I want to recommend this sketchbook to everybody. This right here is probably, if not tied for, it is my favorite sketchbook that I've ever used, ever. And I don't know the name of it. I like it so much that I had to get another one. These are the same sketchbook brand, but I can't tell you what that brand actually is. I got these at my local Ross store here where I live. There's no you're not going to be able to stay, but you want to stop and say hello. Hello, Jordan. Nice for you to stop by. Please feel free to check out the stream when it's all finished up, and if you want to learn about sketchbooks. But the only identifying mark on these sketchbooks is this right here. 176 acid-free perforated pages, manufactured for and distributed by EAI in New York, made in China. So EAI, I've Googled it, and I still can't figure out what it actually is. But the paper for this, despite the fact that it is exceptionally like silky smooth paper, this takes ink and better than almost anything that I've ever used. It's extremely smooth. It can take a whole ton of punishment. Like, this can even take marker coloring, as you can see right here. It takes marker coloring incredibly well, and despite the fact that it's not as thick of paper as I would normally expect, there's very minimal, if any, bleeding onto the next page. I love how this paper feels, the way that it glides underneath my pencil while I'm working with it. This is actually the sketchbook that I did last Inktober in. I actually did all my artwork for Inktober in this sketchbook. I wish I could tell you the name of this brand so that you could go get one for yourself, because you really should. But I can't. I can only say that if you have a Ross, go there, look for the ones that have the 176 acid-free perforated pages, and look for the ones that have the really, really big wire bindings on them. you can see compared to another sketchbook just how absolutely massive this wire binding is. I would really recommend you go and get one of these. If they have them, check them out. Look for this logo on the back. But that was a bunch of sketchbooks to go through. But what I really want to do more than anything is just explain to you what the actual paper surface itself can do and how that would impact if you would want to pick up that paper or not. Because all of these sketchbooks have a different paper feel to them and a different surface quality, as I've been hinting at this whole time. So I want to explain that a little bit more in detail and kind of show you what I mean. So for that, I'm going to pull out my trusty Pentel pocket brush and one of my pencils. In this case, I will use my uni, and as well as an eraser so that I can show you something else that I wanted to talk about. So with all that in mind, you're going to have to mind the fact that I'm in a little bit of a different setup. So I am going to be demoing right here, but my camera is positioned on the table, so there might be just a little bit of wiggle. I'll try to keep that to a minimum. All right, so I'm going to get the camera switched around, and then I want to start explaining and showcasing what the surface of the paper can do and how the different types of surface can impact what you may want to do. So let's get that switched around. Working on it. Okay. So what we're gonna do is I'm actually going to take this. I'm gonna do a little bit of restructuring. Get this back up in the right position. You have to forgive me while I do all this technical stuff. One person that is still watching, since you're still with me, I quite appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. There we go. Working on it, getting there, getting there. This is very professional. I know, you don't even have to say it. I know that's what you're thinking. This is just the most... Okay. That'll work to get us started. And here we go. All right. All these sketchbooks need to get moved out of the way. So many. I have way too many. But that's okay, because I have chosen to do this. Hope you all are having a good Saturday. I'm having a quite good one myself. All right. Oh, hello. Technical difficulty. Hold on. There we go. What a lovely view you have right there. Let's see if we can't change that a little bit. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Apologies for this. This is normally the kind of thing that I would edit out of my video, but we're doing it live, so I can't. All right. That will do just fine. I know. The view will get better here in a second. Phone keeps glitching out. There we go. Oh, this stream is going oh so very well. Okay. So, the one thing that I want to show you is when I was inking this piece the last time that I streamed, I actually used this paper wrong. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna get down real close and show you that, I don't know if you can see it, but the edges where I inked this piece are just a little bit blurry, aren't they? And that's not my camera. That's actually a showcase factor for this sketch paper, which is the fact that this paper is meant for use with pencil. And it does pencil just fine. But when you try to do ink, even if whether it's with a brush or with a pen of any kind really, except for maybe a ballpoint pen, but what you'll find is that the edges right over here, they're going to get just a little bit on the blurry side. And the reason for that is because this paper is not very thick, which means that any liquid that you put on the paper will want to spread out and go into the paper. It won't just stay on the surface, because this paper has texture on the surface, which means that the ink is going to want to get sucked down, and the result will be it's going to just slightly spiderweb out into the rest of the paper. So when we're talking about texture for a paper, basically there's two different types of surface that a paper can have. It can have a smooth surface, which would be like this here, which means that the surface of the paper doesn't have any type of texture on it whatsoever. Or it can have what's called tooth. And tooth, if you zoom in really close and look at it from the side, it could basically be thought of as like zigzags here. Any paper that doesn't feel super smooth will have some type of texture to it like this here. This is how paper like graphite, when you're using graphite, that's how the paper can actually hold the pencil or the graphite in when you're doing shading like this, because all those microscopic little ridges are catching the graphite. If you have a super smooth paper, then it will not catch the graphite at all. So this would be textured. The Strathmore sketch paper is just slightly textured, which means that you don't want to use it with a medium like ink, because you want the ink to rest on the surface of the paper and not go anywhere else. But if the paper has texture like this, then all those little microscopic bits of texture are going to want to grab at that ink and pull it away and pull it out from the area that you want it to be. You can see right here that this paper has actually started to blur the edge of this brush pen just slightly. So, sketch paper, use it for pencil only. Use it for minor exercises in ink if you're going to be using like a ballpoint pen. Any felt tip ones, you don't really want to mess with that. Because as you can see, even if I just hold it here, it's already expanding outwards away from where I have the pen. A paper like the Kanzen Universal sketchbook, this paper is significantly smoother than the Strathmore sketch paper. And the only way I can really communicate it is just feel it. If it feels really smooth, then it can usually take ink pretty well. Because you'll see that when I apply the ink to this paper, it only goes where I want the ink to go. Just showing you a quick example of I don't have to worry about the ink spreading somewhere that it's not supposed to go. That does mean that this paper doesn't do as well when it comes to graphite shading. Because there's very little surface texture, means that the graphite doesn't have as much to grip onto, and so it will work but it won't look smooth. The only way to make graphite shading look smooth is to put it on and then blend it. And if you tried to blend the graphite on here, it would just look smudged as opposed to a nice even graphite tone. So just like this. If I tried to blend this, it just wouldn't work because there's nowhere for it to grip onto and spread. Smooth paper, ink. Textured paper, graphite or color pencil. Those are usually the words that I would recommend you work and live by. If we run over to the Kanzen 1, this is where I did a lot of my studies again for Legend of Zelda. And you can see here that it takes pencil and pen pretty well in equal measure, but I will say that this paper does better with just graphite. It is pretty smooth, but if you look close enough, you'll see that there are times when I erased where the ink doesn't stay as strong on the paper. That's because it didn't get stuck down to the paper enough and was lifted off by my eraser. The paper didn't hold it very well. Thank you. I appreciate that, Feline. But yes, you'll see that there's also sometimes, like right here, it's very small, but there are times where the ink spreads itself out just slightly. I actually like to refer to that as the paper being thirsty. When a paper is thirsty, it'll want to grab at any sort of liquid that occurs on it. This paper works very well for pencil sketching and pencil designing, and it does pretty okay with inking as well. It's not my favorite when it comes to inking, but it is very, very close, and I do still like this sketchbook quite a bit. I don't like a paper that has a whole lot of texture for me to just casually draw or sketch on, because I want the nice gliding feel of the pencil on the paper. I don't want to feel like the paper is resisting me. So this is what I mean by practicing and training yourself to see how the paper works. It's just do stuff like this. Make marks on it with your pencil, and even make marks on it with your pen too, it doesn't matter. Whatever material you want to use in the sketchbook, practice on a page or two of the sketchbook to see how it works. Don't just dive into drawing on it and expect it to be a full masterpiece. Excuse me. So we can pop in another paper now. This is the Strathmore. This is the Strathmore drawing paper. This paper has a lot of texture on it. I can feel it just while I'm working with my pencil on here, but I have to work a little bit harder to get the pencil onto the paper. It doesn't just glide across the surface, because this isn't meant for just casual sketching. This is meant for intensive graphite studies, intensive graphite work. This will hold down your shading and your tones of graphite very, very well. It'll be very smooth and very easy to layer your tone on top of itself. This would not take ink very well at all, because the paper is very thirsty, which means that inevitably there's going to be slight blurring on the edges of this pen, of these pen strokes, because of the way that the paper surface will want to grab at that ink. This is much more meant for graphite. Yep, I can already see that this is going to start spreading outwards. The more textured the paper, the more you want to use it for mediums that you're going to be doing lots of layers on and pushing the layers into each other, like graphite pencil, and color pencil shading. Generally, if a paper surface is very smooth and silky, it will not take color pencil shading very well at all. Again, the exception being this here. Now again, most of the time when you're working with color pencil, you're going to be layering on the colors and then pushing a little bit harder to blend them. And if the paper doesn't have enough texture on it, then when you push with that color pencil, what you're actually going to be doing is, instead of blending the colors together, you'll see here on this color pencil paper that it actually just pushes the pigment out, and you can see much more of the paper underneath. Whereas a good color pencil paper will keep all the layers together and won't let the pigment get pushed away. So despite this being the Koh-i-Noor colored pencil paper, it actually takes colored pencil very poorly. The same with graphite. When I try to blend with both of these, the paper does not hold the graphite down. And yet, for some reason, despite the fact that this Strathmore Tone Tan paper is fairly smooth and fairly light and thin, it does remarkably well with holding colored pencil in place and allowing me to do many, many tones of colored pencil on it. I can do many, many layers with my colored pencil on this paper and not have any issues whatsoever. So despite, again, my rule was the more textured the paper, the better it is suited for dry media like pencil and colored pencil, but yet this smooth paper is the best that I found for colored pencil. You explain that to me, because I have no idea. And then the last one that I wanted to bring up was this, again, this brand that I really want to try to tell you how to get, but I just can't. This is the Ross brand sketchbook by EAI. This paper is silky smooth. This is the smoothest paper I've ever come across. It almost feels like satin, almost. And it takes ink better than almost any excuse me, it takes ink better than almost any paper that I've ever come across. I can do so many wonderful things with this paper and not ever have to worry about the ink spreading out where I don't want it to, and I don't have to worry about it bleeding onto the next page. This does really well for when I'm designing with my pencil and wanting to design, but this would not do very well if I wanted to actually do any kind of shading with pencil if I tried to blend it. Mainly because it would just smudge as opposed to smoothly blend itself out. So this is my favorite this is my favorite paper, period. Again, if you want to try to look for it, go to your local Ross store and look for the sketchbooks that have this label on the back. This is the only identifier that you're going to be able to find. I would go for these if you want to. But the very last thing I'll say when it comes to paper is that the paper with the lowest poundage will not be able to take a whole lot of punishment when it comes to trying to erase. You saw how pretty easy it was for me to erase the on the paper from the Ross brand sketchbook. But if you're not careful, when it comes to really thin paper and you try to erase, you're going to start buckling the paper like this. So you have to hold it down, and even then, if you're not careful, if you're near the edge, it's very easy to accidentally bend or crease this paper, especially if you're right near the edge. Very easy for there to accidentally be a crease formed inside there. Thin paper, this is what I mean by it not being able to stand up to a lot of punishment. There's only so many more times I'll be able to erase this before it just stops working very well. So remember, sketch paper, Use it just for practicing and don't try to refine any drawings you do inside. I'm going to flip this camera around one more time, give my final thoughts, and then call this stream good. Okay. There we go. So in conclusion, ladies and gents, I'm back live again. A disaster. My clamp that I'm using for my phone was on the power button and it was trying to emergency SOS call. I don't want it to do that. I'm fine. Okay. That will work. I'm a little bit at a Dutch angle, but that's okay. I can deal with it. So, just to wrap things up, ladies and gentlemen, for a sort of a TLDR kind of deal, or TLDW kind of thing, too long didn't watch, that's fine. In conclusion, if you want to buy a sketchbook, what do you want to use it for? Do you want to practice? And if you do, then get any of the sketchbooks that have the sketch marking on them. Any of these ones will be very good for you to do nice, easy, quick studies on without you having to worry about any kind of refinement on them. And since they have so many pages in them, you can do a lot more quick practices too and not have to worry about messing up any of the nicer sketchbooks you can buy. There's not many sketchbooks that I buy that are more than $10. I can usually get them on clearance or get a good coupon for them. Oh, more of a painter and digital 3D artist. Nice, that's good to know. And even then, even for a digital artist too, getting just a sketch brand sketchbook can be good to get your ideas down before you actually start rendering them in your digital programs or on your paintings too. I would always recommend that every artist, no matter what your medium, should always have some kind of sketchbook on hand. If you're someone that doesn't do a whole lot of drawing just on its own, then just get yourself one of the cheaper ones with many, many pages with a low poundage on them so that you don't have to invest an enormous amount of money in something that you will only be using for planning. Or even just using computer paper works too. It's just up to you. But the last thing I'll say too is that you've noticed that every single sketchbook I have is wirebound. The other type of sketchbook you can get is the ones that are hardbound, the ones that are like a book. I don't like those at all for two reasons. One, hardbound sketchbooks almost never are able to lay completely flat. You put them on the table and they're always going to be slightly open. Whereas with a wirebound one, you can flip it around to the page that you need and it will always lay flat. And for another, just me personally, but I like to be able to take a drawing out of my sketchbook if I really like it. And you can't really do that with a hardbound one. You literally have to tear it out of the book. And that would just hurt my soul oh so very much. And another thing too is that the hardbound ones, I kind of feel like more of an obligation to make the drawing that's in that hardbound book really, really excellent, because it almost feels like it's a portfolio book or like an art book instead of just a casual sketchbook. So if I just have a page of casual scribbles on it, I would feel like I wasted a page. Not with these ones. I can just sketch in these to my heart's content. Tear them out if I don't like them. I've done that more than once. In case you can't tell, this Kanzen Universal is a little bit thinner than the new one. I may or may not have torn out a few drawings from this one. But any of the sketch ones are not meant to be refined, finished works. Any of the ones that have the word drawing in them are meant to be used more so for work that you intend to finish and maybe publish, or maybe they're just ones that you want to be a little more intensive on. This is the Strathmore drawing. And then there are the ones that just don't have any labeling on them at all. But I've had no problem using these for commission work and using these for both practice and for finished artwork. This is the Ross brand sketchbook. It's still my favorite no matter what. And I want you guys to have one too. If nothing else, just to feel the paper. It's very nice. So, in the end, ladies and gents, the few things that I'll say to you is, if you want a sketchbook because you just want to practice, get one that has the word sketch in the title. If you want one to work with ink, go to your local Hobby Lobby or go to your local Michael's or any art store that you have. Try not to buy a new sketchbook online if you can avoid it, just because you really want to be able to feel the paper in your hands first. Go to your local art shop, feel the paper itself. If the paper feels very nice and smooth, it's usually going to be for ink work. If the paper has a lot of texture to it, then it's meant to be used more so for colored pencil or graphite work. Of course, as I said, there are always exceptions to this rule. As I said, I'll say it again and I'll say it again. The tone tan paper, despite being really, really smooth, takes colored pencil better than almost any paper that I've ever used. So, just remember that. The higher the pound on the paper, the more punishment the paper can take. The more layers, the more erasing, all of that good stuff. The higher the weight, usually the better the paper quality is going to be, which is why you won't get as many sheets if the paper weight is higher, because there will be less of them. More weight equals thicker paper equals less sheets. So that was very long-winded. Thank you all very much for watching. If you watched it all the way through, I really appreciate it. It's more specifically, I'm going to call out Feline Sign. They stayed and watched the entire video, I believe. Thank you very much for watching all of my videos. And until next time, ladies and gents, I hope you have yourselves a very good day. I certainly have. I have a table full of sketchbooks. I'm a very happy camper. You don't need all of these. Just get one. Or maybe two, one for sketching, one for finished work, anything like that. Have a great Saturday too, and I'll see you guys later. Have yourselves a good day. Great way to end it, just bash the screen.